How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to talk about my 2021 Kawasaki Z125 Pro that I've had for about 6 months, and in that time I've probably put about a little over 2,000 miles on it. I'm going to take this helmet off because this is making me anxious. So, like I said, I've had the bike about 6 months. I bought it in like the end of September, so I guess it's been 7, whatever. It's the first motorcycle I've ever owned. It's the first motorcycle I've ever ridden, as a matter of fact. And so I may be both biased because it's mine and a little bit blind to other motorcycles, having never ridden one. However, these are my thoughts regardless. So in 6 months of ownership, the things I've come away with this bike are that it's actually a very interesting thing to own. Like, people are always wondering about it too. For something that's so common, you know, like they do sell them and they're at dealerships and places around here. I get stopped constantly at gas stations and stuff with people asking me what kind of bike it is, how fast it goes. A lot of people saying they don't like bigger bikes and that this is something that they could get on board with, which is cool, and it's always nice. So as far as how fast it does go, it's gotten to about, the fastest I've had it down a hill with, you know, wind in my back is 67, but I know the speedometer's a little bit off, so it's probably closer to 64. It'll cruise at 55 if you really want to pin it, but I like to try to go easy on it. It gets about between 70 and 80 miles per gallon real world testing because it's being ragged on all the time. If I was going easier on it or was in the city, it would probably get better gas mileage. I've noticed in the last 2,000 miles since I bought it, the engine has changed a lot in its characteristics. It's very interesting because when I bought it, it sounded a lot just like a scooter. And as I've owned it a little bit more, it's gotten quite a bit louder and it sounds more like a motorcycle. This is a common thing I've heard people say in reviews about this thing, which is cool. Just a second. And yeah, it's something that I really like because, yeah, I don't know, it's sounding cool is definitely an advantage. One other thing I will note that I would have been curious about when I bought it is that riding 2-up is actually not as bad as I thought it would be on this thing. Everyone that's been on this bike with me has weighed less than 130 pounds, and I'm about 135 myself, so it's not all that much weight, but you can definitely feel the difference. The biggest issue with riding 2-up on this thing is the brakes, which leave a lot to be desired. But in terms of power, of course, your top speed is going to be down, but it's doable, especially if you're in the town, you know, not that big of a deal. Reliability wise, this has been pretty good for the most part. I've only had a couple issues with it, and one is fairly common and the other one is my fault directly, which I'll get to in a second. The first one was one of the engine mounts came loose, the engine mount bolts. So I was riding it one day and all of a sudden it got super shaky. Like every time it would get above 6,000 RPM, it got ridiculously, like you could see it in the mirrors, the whole thing just shaking like crazy. And I was like, oh man, what have I done? So I took it to the dealership because it's under warranty, where they told me that for the warranty to cover it, they'd have to tear the engine down and put it back together to prove that it wasn't, you know, like owner error or my fault. And that if they did that and it wasn't covered, I'd have to pay for it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna take it home and try to get a look at it myself. And after about an hour of Googling, I know I should have done this first, I found it's pretty common, and it's actually the rear motor mount, which is on the right side. You actually access it most on the left side. It's that bolt right in there. And then on the other side, you have to take off the sprocket cover, and it'll be right in there between the top and the bottom of the chain. You might even be able to see it right now, I don't know, but it's fairly simple. You need to have somebody on both sides, somebody to hold the wrench on the other side, and then you just tighten it like a half turn, and that took care of the issue completely. The other issue, which is a pretty easy one to make, and one that I strongly suggest you try to avoid, is the oil filter. So I actually, when I was changing the oil the second time on this bike, not the first time, when I was changing the oil the second time on this bike, I was kind of lazy with it. The first time, because I'd never done it before, I was very attentive to all the details. The second time, I messed a couple things up. One of which being, you can't put the oil filter in backwards. This is like a one-directional filter or something of the sort. And if you put it in backwards, which you can do, and it is doable, I assumed it just wouldn't fit in the other way, which was my bad. Oil won't get to the top end of the engine. So I was riding this one day after changing the oil, and it completely like locked up and cut out on me, and I thought for sure that I had blown the engine up. So I foolishly, after a while it started back up, I rode it back home anyways, because I had no other way to get home. Switched the oil filter around once I figured it out, and did an oil change again, and it actually ended up being perfectly fine. So I've ridden it probably a few hundred miles since then with no issues, and it's ridden great. So then I had that engine mount issue. I had to tighten the chain a couple times. I wish I could do a riding video of it. I've upgraded two things on it. One being the levers, clutch and brake levers. These are great and very useful, but definitely not a necessity. And then the other one being the mirrors, which is actually very helpful and important. So the stock mirrors that came with it just looks kind of goofy, and I wanted some of these side mirrors I keep seeing everywhere. But when I started using them, I actually realized that it's hard to see things behind you, because the other ones were kind of higher up here, so I could see them from my peripheral without actually having to look down to see it. Whereas these are more down. So to fix that, I just angled this one up and that one down so I can see what's going on behind me in my peripheral, which is nice. I have taken this bike all around southeast Missouri to where I live. I would love to do some moto vlogs if I ever got the equipment to do them. But I still love the bike. I mean, I'm planning on upgrading and getting a cruiser at some point because I like to go out for hours. And one of the things is it's still a mini bike no matter what, so it's not going to be as comfortable as a cruiser. I was going to try to modify it. I wanted the big board out and put an intake and an exhaust on it, but it's really, in my opinion, unless you're going to race it, not really worth the money to put into it, because you're not going to get anything else back out of it. I wouldn't sink the money into a bike. It's only worth a few $1,000s. The tires are actually wearing pretty well. You can actually see, because they've got dirt on them right now, how far that tread goes down. It's pretty impressive for having over 2,000 miles on it. I have honestly probably abused the shit out of this bike in the time that I've had it. It's had mud completely coated all over the engine. I thought that was going to kill it. It didn't. I've taken the airbox off before and just zip tied a filter over the air hose, and that was cool. It sounded really loud, but it ran like shit. So I've actually broken the turn signal off on accident. Because I don't really have a way to transport this bike, I'm actually able to fit it in my car. Yes, I have a hatchback. I have a 2010 Honda Fit, which is a subcompact car, and actually, surprisingly, this does fit in it, not a big deal. I have to bend the bars down for it to fit, but it's as simple as just loosening those 4 bolts and just bending it down, and it actually fits, which is awesome. I just tie it down with some toe straps to make sure that it's not going to fall over. It runs great. I actually just filled it up. I put 91 in this. There's one gas station that has ethanol-free 91. I'm not sure it makes much of a difference, but every time I have to store it, like over the winter, it's nice to have ethanol-free fuel. Yeah, 2,191 miles. Starts right up, even after all the shit it's been through with the, I'm guessing, overheating or being starved of oil and everything, being constantly at around 9,000 RPM. That's just the way I ride it, but it actually sounds pretty good. You can really, it's very thumpy compared to how it was when I bought it. It's on pretty well. It actually, I'm very pleased for the engine size about how this thing runs. So I think it's totally worth the money, because I wanted to ride a motorcycle. I've always wanted to, but I was never raised around them. So I didn't really have the opportunity to learn anything else, and I was too intimidated to just go full in and buy a full-size bike or a cruiser or whatever, because it was just, I was worried. I don't know, it freaked me out a bit, especially being around, you know, raised with parents, and they mean well. It's not a bad thing, because it is more dangerous than a car, obviously, no matter what you do. But this I felt safer on. It was more approachable, and it was more, you know, financially feasible. So I'm a college student. It was actually really difficult for me to scrape up the cash to buy this thing, but I did, and I'm very pleased with it. So I actually taught myself how to ride it. I've seen countless YouTube videos on this, but I hadn't actually done it. I had done this, and I taught myself in the parking lot how to ride it. So this is how I de-stress now. As I go out and I ride the Z125, I put 2,000 miles on it in 6 months. I don't know if that's a lot or not, but it feels like a lot because I'm riding it pretty often for a bike this small. Everything's very simple to do on it, all the maintenance. The engine's just an air-cooled single cylinder, so you don't really have to worry about that. When the oil needs changing, you'll notice it doesn't shift as well, and especially if you're not moving and you try to shift it, it won't go through the gears, and that's kind of how I know that it needs an oil change a lot of the time. The headlight, I would suggest switching out with an LED lamp, because it doesn't really do anything. I don't ride this at night because where I live, these kind of areas, of course it's a little bit more city-like than this, but there's deer everywhere, so I just avoid riding anything with 2 wheels at night, and it's probably in good taste. So yeah, so far that's my opinion and my thoughts on the Z125 Pro. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And overall, I love the bike, and the only reason I would get rid of it is if I wanted something a little bigger. But there's a certain aspect of fun to just being able to rag on it all the time and not really speeding very much. It's a lot of fun just to completely rev the hell out of it. So, all right.